This is a Seawolf-class submarine. 9,000 tons of steel, a nuclear reactor, and enough weaponry to reshape a coastline, rising toward 3 feet of Arctic ice. The reinforced sail makes contact, and the ice holds. Whether this submarine punches through or sinks to the bottom with all hands aboard depends on a single measurement someone made weeks ago, and the crew hoped it was still right. The people who made that measurement are standing on the ice right now, directly above the submarine, listening to it push against the floor beneath their feet. The ice under their boots is vibrating. If their numbers were wrong, if the ice is thicker than they calculated, or if the drift carried the surfacing window away from the submarine's position, they'll know in about 10 seconds. And so will the crew below. The people you see standing above the submarine are researchers, engineers, and support crews from the Arctic Submarine Laboratory, based, of all places, in San Diego, California. The same city with the beaches and perpetual 70-degree days, and somehow it's home to the Navy's entire Arctic ice operations program. Their job out here is to turn a drifting sheet of frozen ocean into an operations base precise enough for a nuclear submarine to surface through from below. The camp looks like someone dropped a science station on the moon. Bright, colorful tents against endless white, generators humming around the clock, antenna masts and drilling rigs poking up from the ice. Over 200 people from 4 countries, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Norway, living and working on a surface that is actively moving beneath them. Every few years, the Navy builds one of these stations on floating sea ice and names it after a submarine that made Arctic history, Camp Sargo, Camp Sea Dragon, and runs it for about 5 weeks before the team picks up and flies out. Since the 1960s, they've built over 26 of them. The camp they set up last week is not at the same coordinates today. It won't be at the same coordinates tomorrow. And the people living on it are trusting that the ice beneath them is thick enough to hold. The first thing the team did when they arrived was drill. Core drills punch through the ice to measure everything that matters: thickness, salt content, crystal structure, and the brine channels running through the ice at different depths. They weren't looking for just any spot. They were hunting for a very specific window. Ice thin enough for a submarine to push through from below, but thick enough to support the camp standing on top of it. That window is 2 to 3 feet. Go thicker and the submarine's sail, the tall reinforced tower on top of the hull, cracks before the ice does, potentially tearing open the fairwater planes and flooding the compartments that keep the submarine controllable. Go thinner and the ice under 200 people collapses into the Arctic Ocean. The margin between a successful surfacing and a catastrophe is measured in inches. Once they found the right spot, they marked it and lowered acoustic transponder beacons through the drill holes into the water below. 3 beacons creating a precise 3-dimensional grid, like an invisible parking space under a frozen ceiling. The submarine doesn't just find the camp, it parks in a designated spot with feet of precision. But this is way more complicated than finding a parking spot on a weekend day at the mall. That's because the ice moves. Arctic sea ice drifts with currents and wind, sometimes shifting miles in a single day, and the beacons drift with it. The surfacing window slides with it. That carefully measured spot of perfect thickness has been migrating sideways since the moment the team drilled it, and the submarine below has to track that moving target while navigating blind, and hit it exactly. The submarine has been navigating blind for days. No GPS, no satellite link, no way to verify position against anything external. The only system that works down here is inertial. Gyroscopes and accelerometers tracking every turn, every depth change, every current nudging the hull sideways. Pure math compounding over days. The system doesn't know if it's right, it only knows what it's measured. And every tiny sensor imperfection adds a sliver of error that grows with each passing hour. Imagine driving across the country with your eyes closed, using nothing but a compass and a stopwatch, and needing to park in a specific spot at the end. Now imagine the road is sliding underneath you while you drive. A drift in the gyroscope on day 1 becomes hundreds of yards of uncertainty by day 4, and you won't know how far off you are until either you find the beacons or you don't. Those 3 acoustic beacons were the first external reference the crew had in days. The submarine's sonar picked up the signals, faint at first, then stronger, and triangulated the exact position relative to the surfacing window. After navigating in the dark for days on end, the crew finally knew exactly where they were and, more importantly, exactly where the ice camp expected them to be. And just getting there was arguably scarier than punching through the ice. The ice canopy above isn't flat. From below, the underside of Arctic ice looks like an inverted mountain range, with ridges and valleys hanging down into the water. When ice sheets collide on the surface, they buckle and pile into pressure ridges. And while the part you'd see above might be a few feet tall, the keel below extends downward 30 meters or more. These pressure keels account for nearly half of all Arctic ice volume, and most of that danger is completely invisible from above. The submarine at periscope depth might have 60 feet of clearance overhead, which sounds comfortable until one of those keels hanging down 50 feet eats most of that margin. 10 feet left. The submarine is 40 feet in diameter. At that point, you're threading a 9,000-ton vessel through a gap that barely clears the hull, and there's no room for error in any direction. One uncharted keel and the submarine contacts ice at depth, hundreds of miles from open water, under a ceiling with no holes in it. If something fails here, the crew solves it themselves or they don't solve it at all. There's no rescue capability for continuous Arctic ice. The nearest help might as well be on the moon. The submarine mapped this inverted terrain in real time using upward-looking sonar, firing sound pulses toward the ceiling and listening for the echo, the same principle a bat uses to navigate in the dark. Normally, submarine sonar paints downward, bouncing off the seafloor to measure depth. But under Arctic ice, the danger isn't below, it's above, and the Navy needed sonar that looks up instead of down. The way they got it was almost embarrassingly simple. Dr. Waldo Lyon, a physicist at the Arctic Submarine Laboratory, and researcher Art Roshan took a fathometer, the standard device for measuring ocean depth, and mounted it upside down on top of the submarine, pointed it at the ceiling instead of the floor. That was the entire invention, and that improvised solution became the foundation for every Arctic submarine transit since. Lyon earned it. He spent 55 years at the Arctic Submarine Laboratory working out of a converted World War II mortar battery called Battery Whistler in San Diego. Inside that bunker, he built a cryostat, an industrial freezer, and then spent decades punching miniature submarine sails through lab-grown ice. Hundreds of times, varying the thicknesses, changing the brine concentration, testing different sail shapes and ascent speeds. He calculated exactly how Arctic ice fractures under upward force, where the cracks start, how they propagate, what makes ice shatter cleanly versus resist and deform. Before any real submarine attempted what this crew is doing right now, those miniature sails had already proven the physics inside a San Diego freezer. Right now, these crews are betting their lives on a single man in a bunker playing with toy submarines in a freezer. 400 military submarines operate worldwide. The number that can survive under Arctic ice? You can count them on two hands. Diesel-electric boats need to snorkel air from the surface through a retractable mast. Under continuous ice with no access to open water, the boat suffocates. Even most nuclear submarines, which take their own power and their own breathable air, aren't built to take what comes next. But this one is special. This is a Seawolf-class boat. $3 billion, the most expensive attack submarine ever built. Only 3 exist because the Cold War ended before the Navy could justify more. But the ones they built were designed for exactly where this crew is sitting right now, inside an ocean with a ceiling that's trying to crush them. But it won't, thanks to some very special steel. The hull on this boat is HY100 steel, rated to resist 100,000 pounds of pressure per square inch before it even begins to deform. You could balance a fully loaded 737 on a square inch of that steel and it wouldn't flinch. The sail above the crew's heads is reinforced with thicker plating and inertial framing built specifically to absorb the impact of punching through ice from below, and every mast, periscope, and antenna inside it has already been retracted. Because anything sticking up when that sail hits gets sheared off like a branch in a storm. With all their sensors pulled in, the crew is ready. But they don't go up just yet. The submarine hovers beneath the surfacing window, holding position in the water column while the upward-looking sonar scans the ice directly overhead. This is the crew's one chance to check the ice camp's measurement with their own instruments before they commit. and it's the last decision point where they can still back off. In the control room, the sonar operator calls out thickness readings: 2.8 feet, 2.6, 2.9. Each number echoing through the compartment as the captain compares it against what the ice camp reported weeks ago. If the sonar says 4 feet and the camp said 2, they don't surface. They back off and hunt for a new window. And all of that beacon navigation was for nothing. But the numbers are matching. The ice overhead is within the window. The captain has his go, and every person in that control room knows what comes next. Topside, the ice camp crew already knows the submarine is close. They've been tracking its approach on hydrophones for the last hour, listening to the faint hum of machinery growing steadily louder as the boat converges on the surfacing window. Now they're standing well clear of the mark zone, behind the safety perimeter, because in about 60 seconds, several thousand tons of steel is going to come through the floor they're standing on. The ice beneath their feet is already groaning with the pressure changes below. Low, uneven creaks that sound nothing like the wind. Anyone standing in the wrong spot when the fractures start propagating is not going to have time to move. Then the captain gives the order. 2 words: emergency blow. High-pressure air floods the ballast tanks, all of them, all at once, and the sound is unmistakable. A rushing roar that fills every compartment on the boat like someone opened every fire hydrant on a city block simultaneously. 9,000 tons of submarine becomes buoyant, fast, and the boat rises, not like a missile, but more like an elevator, controlled and steady, but powerful enough that everyone on board grabs something solid. The ascent rate is calibrated. Too slow and the sail doesn't carry enough force to crack the ice. Too fast and the hull overshoots. The helmsmen hold the angle, the depth gauge spins, and then the sail makes contact. Cracks spiderweb outward from the point of contact. Not hairline fractures, but deep slits racing across the ice in every direction, like a windshield hit by a rock at highway speed. A deep groan rolls over the ice field, low and resonant, the kind of sound you feel in your chest more than you hear with your ears. The sound of a frozen ocean losing an argument with 9,000 tons of steel. Then the ice gives. The sail punches through first, that hardened tower built exactly for this moment. Then the hull follows, shouldering aside fractured slabs as the rounded shape does what it was designed to do, shedding ice laterally instead of bearing the full weight on top. Chunks the size of dining tables slide off the curved surface and splash into the gaps between broken plates, while smaller fragments scatter across the remaining ice like shrapnel. The submarine's buoyancy is generating thousands of pounds of continuous upward force. Not an explosion, but a slow and relentless hydraulic press powered by the ocean itself. And the hull keeps rising until the waterline stabilizes and the full mass of the submarine settles into the hole that it just made. Then silence. The submarine sits in a field of white, surrounded by broken ice and dark water showing through the fractures. Steam rises from the hull where warm metal meets cold air enough to freeze exposed skin in under a minute, curling upward in wisps that vanish almost instantly. From above, it looks like a black island that materialized out of nothing. 30 seconds ago, this was an unbroken sheet of ice, and now there's a nuclear submarine sitting in the middle of it. The ice camp crew standing nearby just watched a submarine appear through a floor in the Arctic Ocean, the same floor they've been sleeping on for weeks. Before anyone opens that hatch, the crew inside runs a damage assessment. The sail just absorbed the full impact of 3 feet of ice. The captain needs to know it took the hit clean before exposing the interior of the submarine to the Arctic. Flooding indicators, hull integrity sensors, pressure readings across every compartment. Did the impact crack a weld? Is there water where there shouldn't be? The diving officer confirms the boat is stable. The chief of the watch reports no flooding alarms, and only then does the captain give the order to open the upper hatch. The hatch cracks open into sub-zero air and sailors climb onto the hull in full Arctic gear, immediately going to work with chainsaws, axes, and steam lines. Ice clings to everything: the missile hatches, the communication masts, every square foot of deck surface coated in frozen seawater that locked on the instant it contacted sub-zero air. Not a thin glaze, but thick, uneven crusts of salt ice that have to be physically removed before anything beneath them can function. The crew works section by section, chainsaws biting through slabs, axes chipping at edges, and steam lines melting what the blades can't reach. From a distance, you'd see people standing on top of a nuclear submarine in the middle of a frozen wasteland running chainsaws like they're clearing fallen trees after a storm. Except the trees are slabs of fractured ocean and the ground beneath them is a $2 billion weapons platform. In a real-world scenario, every minute those hatches stay frozen shut is a minute the submarine can't do its job. Every minute the comm masts stay encased in ice is a minute the submarine is invisible to its own chain of command, and not in the way that it wants to be. The cold doesn't wait either. Seawater freezes at around -2 degrees Celsius, but the air up here hits -40, and the water touching exposed metal freezes on contact like breathing on a cold window, except the frost is salt water and it's locking down every system it touches. Clear one section, walk 20 feet to the next, and by the time you look back, the section you started on is already glazing over again. The crew isn't cleaning the hull. They're racing the atmosphere itself, and the atmosphere is winning every time they stop moving. Those missile hatches need to be operational within minutes of surfacing. Until the communication masts are clear, the submarine can't talk to anyone in the chain of command, can't receive orders, transmit status, or confirm its position. The comm mast is priority one. The crew attacks the ice around it first, chainsaws cutting close, steam lines blasting the joints where ice is bonded to metal. The moment the mast is free and extends above the surface, the submarine makes its first contact with the outside world in days. A burst transmission confirming the boat surfaced intact, position verified, systems operational, awaiting further orders. This is vital since a nuclear submarine that surfaces through 3 feet of Arctic ice but can't communicate is nothing more than a very expensive ice sculpture with a nuclear reactor inside it. If you like this Navy video, check out this video about how an aircraft carrier makes 18,000 meals a day. Bye for now.